I'd like to call this Budget Committee meeting to order. It is 6:19. I apologize for us being so late. Thank you for waiting for us. It is Wednesday, April 6th. We are in the Nashua High School North Boardroom. What did I say, 6:19? I will do roll call. Ms. Darling?
Here.
Mr. Claffey?
Here.
Ms. Gilio?
Here.
Ms. Raymond is absent. Ms. Lampier?
Here.
Ms. Brown?
Here.
Ms. Eam is absent. Ms. Johnson?
Present.
And Ms. Bishop is here. We also have Dr. McKinney, Mr. Donovan, and Dave Rossio. Got it. Okay. Thank you, and I will turn this meeting over to you guys because you are the holders of all the knowledge, and we just listen.
Yes, that's how I like to be.
What is stuff?
Would you like us to genuflect as well?
No, that's fine. That's a little over the top. You have a packet here, but we'll go over that. We'll start with our final presentation of this budget season. And I'm not sure if we saved the best for last, but we did save transportation for last. You make the decision on that. So I will turn it over to Dave Rossio, and he'll discuss the transportation budget.
See what I have to work with every day? Good evening, folks. My name is Dave Rossio, Transportation Director for the school district. It's my 17th school year here. I'll give you a quick overview of the Transportation Department and what we do, and then take some questions. Nashua School District partners with First Student to provide our transportation for all in-district transportation, meaning anything Nashua, from school to school and back home again, is done through First Student. And I'll just go through later in the slide. There's some out-of-district carriers that we do use, but everything in the city is through First Student. Nationally, transportation of children on school buses is one of the safest forms of transportation available. It is far safer than having a student in a car on the way to school. There's this year's budget versus next year's budget. You see that increase, that is a contract increase only. This is our second year of a 5-year contract with them, so next year will be our third. Where do we go? Obviously, we go to all the public schools in the district. Franklin Street was new to us this year. We also do Clearway, the 3 Catholic schools, and the 2 charter schools. Who do we transport? Transport elementary students who live more than a mile away from their school, or middle or high school students more than 2 miles away from their school, or students who have transportations written into their IEP. In some instances, there may be ELL, some transportation as well. Additional things that we run would be things like high school shuttles, each block, late buses, the voc ed buses. Summer school seems to be growing every year, pretty robust summer school program, lots of out-of-district transportation, and then there's athletics and field trips. Some phrases you'll hear if you're hanging around my office enough is route, run, and tear, and just sort of go through them. A route is typically made up of 3 runs: a high school run, a middle school run, and an elementary run. A run is one trip to a school. So one bus picking up in French Hill and going to Nashua North in the morning is one run. It'll be the first tier of a route, which would have 3 runs. These are our current bell times, and you'll see that the green listed schools are tier 1. The red, or I'm colorblind, but maroon listed schools is tier 2. And the bluish ones are tier 3. And what we'll try to do is a Nashua North bus would then go and do a Pennachuck route, which may do a Birch Hill or a Charlotte Ave route. We may get into situations where we may have a student living in transition on the south side of town, so that Pennachuck route, instead of going to Charlotte Ave, if it has to drop a kid off in the afternoon going all the way down by Maine Dunstable, it may do a Maine Dunstable run coming home. So we do mix and match the routes when we have to and adjust according to who's riding them. Out-of-district transportation, there's a couple types of transportation. There's McKinney-Vento, which is our transitional students, and then there are students that special ed has placed outside of the district. These schools here are the out-of-district schools we currently transport to. The number of kids has gone down on the out-of-district, which is good. The number of locations has gone up, though. Some of the schools that we place kids to out of district don't have the staff, so they couldn't take more kids, so we're actually placing kids further away. We just got one for the Dearborn Academy in Newton, Mass. I never heard of that school until about 2 weeks ago. We've never transported there. And, you know, so whether there's 10 kids on that bus going to Dearborn or one student, the cost is the same. So out-of-district transportation is pretty expensive. I do try, if it is only one kid, if there's another school district locally that may be going down there, and in that case, that's what we did. We jumped on Salem, New Hampshire, had a student going down. Sometimes there is no one else, and we're the only one, and we're paying pretty much full rate to get a kid down there. As I said earlier, First Student provides all the in-district transportation. Durham, Caring Hands, and North Reading are commonly used vendors for the kids going outside the district. Students living in transition. District currently has 276 kids in transition. We not only transport them from in Nashua, so if a student from the north is in transition, but he's living in Nashua in the south, we'll take him to school. But we also take kids as far as away from Methuen or Manchester. You can see the list there. At one point, we had a kid from Bristol, New Hampshire. So it's wherever they land, we try and get them back here. Again, it can be really tough trying to get the routes to do that. And we'll try to team up with other districts if we can. This clip's a couple years old. I'm waiting for a new one to come out post-pandemic, but even going into the pandemic, there was a nationwide bus driver shortage. The pandemic certainly did not help things. I don't really know anyone in the transportation business that's fully staffed. Amazon's always looking, FedEx is always looking. It's becoming a serious problem. We're actually, First Student here locally has been pretty good. This year, they were able to take a number of out-of-district routes for the first time, which was a big help to us. Been great all winter. As soon as the fall sports season ended, service been terrific. It's going to heat up now because we asked them to do a lot more this time of year for the final couple of months or so. Bus tickets, there is no charge for kids younger than 8th grade and younger. The high school students pay $65 for a full year or $32.50 for a half-year pass, unless they're on the free reduced lunch. Then they'll get a free reduced pass. Some of the challenges is, again, the driver monitor shortage. You could never have enough. Even if we had enough, I'd tell them to keep trying to hire over there. The district-wide SPED programs, by nature, are inefficient. So, your typical kids that go to Maine Dunstable or live by Maine Dunstable, you can roll up to a bus stop, pick up 20 kids, and the school's not far away. Your district-wide special ed programs, you're going all over the place and maybe picking up one kid driving all the way across town. So it's not as efficient as the regular transportation. Charter schools, specifically like ASD, doesn't fit neatly bell times with our other middle schools in town. So they'll go in the morning as a second tier, and then they have to get taken home as a third tier, and it's a challenge. And those schools, Microsociety and ASD, have grown quite a bit since they've moved here. And again, the transitional students, as I've mentioned earlier, can be a challenge, just depending where they live and what school they're going to. Unknowns for next year. Microsociety is opening a new school. The last I heard is they haven't finalized the location, so they may start with some modular units on their current location, but sometimes they're going to go to a different location. Not really sure how many kids. The location of itself is a big deal. If it's real close, great. Probably use the same buses they have now. If it's at the very top of Amherst Street, might not be able to. So we'll find that out. And then waiting on Franklin Street, is that going to be able to take all the pre-K classes, which I'm hoping it would, and we'd be able to consolidate a lot of stuff instead of right now, we're still busing pre-K to Birch Hill, New Searles, and Bicentennial. And what's new in transportation, we do have the First View Parent app out and going. It's on about 50 of the routes right now. Next year, that'll be fully out there, and I've got nothing but good reviews from people who've used it, and it's really helped out. So the parent app is you can put in your child's bus and get notifications as it's heading to your bus stop, which is really helpful for the parents if something is running late. You can also know when they're starting to head home. And after a lengthy conversion, we are all done with my new transportation system, which happened, I think we fully went online sometime in late January or so, and that's been, this is our first major upgrade since 1999. So things are a lot different, but a lot smoother too. And that's it for my presentation. I'll take any questions you have. Yes.
I have two questions, and the first one may not, one of them may not be for you, but, so I understand that we have to bear the cost of the 3 Catholic schools in Nashua and the 2 charter.
That's correct.
Okay, that's my first question. The second one is, on the districts, the places that we take children to out of here.
Yep.
I'm just curious as to what Hollis Brookline has that we don't have here in Nashua.
That may be a transitional student.
Oh, okay. I just thought, I was imagining that there was a program we were lacking, but I couldn't imagine
No,
that.
that's a transitional.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. How much do we make off of the bus passes that we charge for?
I don't have the number off my top of the head, but I think it's typically been around 90 to 100, Dan, 1,000?
No, I think the bus pass is around about 75, 80.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
historical, but then we didn't have those during COVID times at all. We didn't charge it, and so I haven't checked the number this year, but we would budget, I believe, 80,000 each year.
So I'm from way back when we didn't pay for bus passes for school at all. And you have a beautiful slide that says that the transportation of children has school buses as one of the safest. Why are we not moving towards not charging students?
That's a board policy. That's not me. We've been doing
Oh,
that
cool.
since
Jen, we'll
I've
talk
got
about
here.
that later.
It has to do with parking and the parking passes and making it even for kids. Yeah, we've had this discussion before, but we can have it again. Dan probably knows all about it,
Okay.
right?
Well, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's been around, I don't know how long, for a very long time.
Since I was in high school,
But I think
2 years ago.
really. But I think one of the reasons it was done was a lot of the high school kids drive themselves or get rides after a while. So most of the kids on the buses are freshmen and sophomore. And it was probably a revenue source at one point in time. It's not a lot of money, but it is money that goes to the revenue to reduce the taxes. Is there any other reason why it has value to you? Because they'll.
No, I mean, we also, on the free lunch program, they also get like free athletics here in town. So that was, for a while, I think they were trying to use that program as much as they could to get more kids involved in a lot of different things. As far as, and then the flip side of that, we started going to user fees for a lot of different things at one point too. But this is, we were charging $50 when I got here 17 years ago. At one point, I think in 09 or 10, we went to 65. But it's been here for a long time.
And for the kids that we transport out of district, do we get any Medicaid funds for their transportation because they're going to get a service?
We would get catastrophic aid reimbursements if that particular child qualifies for it.
Okay.
And I think we'd get a percentage of that. I don't think we get the whole thing.
Ms. Johnson, sorry.
Thank you. This could come to the Finance Committee, and we can get some more information on it versus...
For the bus passes?
For the bus passes, because we usually discuss that anyway, because last year, we voted not to refund everybody that we had bus pass money on, didn't we, last year? That we,
Yeah, I believe one year we refunded, and then the next year we didn't charge them.
right. So we did adjust things when we had to, but I think that would be a committee, because it's finance, and
Put that right on your agenda.
I will. I'll put that right on my agenda, Mr. Donovan.
For May.
For May, oh, absolutely. We don't need to talk about that now. May is fine with me. And anybody who'd like to come and speak on it,
Yep.
that would be a perfect place to come into the meeting. Thank you.
Ms. Lampier?
So I saw that the routes that you guys do are broken down, and you do Catholic schools and charter schools.
Yes.
And so that price is, no, I can't find it. The price is listed separately. Do we get any money for transporting kids to Catholic school or charter schools?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Do we get any money for transporting?
No, state of New Hampshire says that we have to offer the charter schools and the Catholic schools the same service we offer the public schools.
Is that something new?
No, it's been that way, again, since before I got here.
Oh, okay. All right, that's good to know. And then I was also,
Can I add off of that? Are we still transporting the kids from, if they need OT, PT, speech, reading, are we still transporting them from their home school to the public school where they would get those instead of having OT, PT, speech go into the schools?
We are not doing that this year.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, Ms. Lampier, I took your floor.
That's okay. The other question I had was, it says how bad is the school bus driver shortage? And, you have there's like a desperate, severe, moderate, mild, none. I was just wondering what you would rate our school district as. Like, what kind of problems are you having with it?
I'd say above average to some of the other districts around, and I'd say we're okay. Like I said, all winter, because, the sports are mostly in the evening. We were fine. It's really busy with what we task them to do. By contract, we're only supposed to have about 13 buses out in an afternoon. And generally we're there until things, we get 3 or 4 rainy days and everything starts getting rescheduled and stacked up on top of each other. And then it's, it gets really tight.
Okay. All right, that's cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to speak to that point, a couple things we did. First Student signed a new contract with their bus drivers a couple years ago. It was a significant increase. So the bus drivers at this terminal were making at that point, I don't know what's happened in the last 2 years, more than other people. And as a district, during COVID, we decided to continue to pay the bus drivers. So there was a discounted rate. We didn't pay for the full rate per bus, but we paid a percentage. They were able to keep the bus drivers paid, therefore the bus drivers didn't leave to go other places. So when we came back full-time, we had more of the staff than some of the other districts who had said, well, we're not going to continue to pay, then their bus drivers weren't paid, and more of those people may have gone on. So even though it was something, I don't like paying for something we don't get, but I think it did work out for
That
us.
was money well spent. We still lost a few, but we lose a few every summer because if they're not locked in long-term on seniority over there, they may jump ship to go get a signing bonus somewhere else or something like that. It's always, you lose, but we pick up some people too, so. But when we started back up, we had a pretty good staff to go.
Yeah, I think we worked really hard at making sure during COVID that we didn't lose a lot of people, and we invested in that, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah, that was good.
That was a good move for our district, and I am affiliated with another district that did not pay their bus drivers a penny. So.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Take care.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, so in the, excuse me, in the packet I handed out, today. I just want to run through a couple things, and then I'll spend a little time on grants and special revenue funds. But included is, when Mr. Smith was here last week, he kept talking about, that's in your packet, that's in your, if you want to look at the detail. Well, it wasn't in your packet, and I was going to tell him that, but he kept saying it, and then I just let it go. But that's what 4B2 is. That's his detail. That's what he starts with. So that gives you more detail on the various slides that he shared with you. Item number, this says number 15, these are responses to most of the questions that people have asked that we could not answer during presentations. So there were questions related to tuition rates that we charge for our programs, the number of Chromebooks that were not returned. There's a sheet on there showing all the detail by school, and then various other questions that were asked. So I think that answers all except for one or two questions that I'm still getting information on. Okay, so now what I will do is we'll go through the special revenue funds. Now, special revenue funds, these are not in the operating budget. What you're going to approve in the next few weeks is to approve the operating budget. These are other sources of funds for the district, and like I said, we'll go through them. So in a sense, you should probably approve this budget also. It's, they support themselves. So it's not taxpayer-funded dollars, but they support themselves. So if you want to start with the first one, did this have a number on it? Yes, 14B, sorry. So I'll just run through each one of these in summary, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. The first and the largest by far of the special revenue funds is the food service fund. The food service fund supports itself. We sell lunches, we get funds from the government, students, teachers, et cetera, buy lunches. The revenue that comes in covers the cost of our staff, the benefits associated with them, and the food and materials, et cetera. Each year, we've been able to run this so that there was a profit at the end of the year, except during COVID, we continued to pay the staff, and we weren't serving lunches. And then the second year, when we were just doing bagged lunches before we went back full-time. During that time period, we lost $1.3 million in this fund. So last year, was able to come up with that fund, those funds, because we had savings in the operating budget for various other things. We ended up working out a special accounting process with the city, but we were able to get that money back in. This year, interestingly enough, they're going to have their most profitable year ever. And the reason for that is because it's free lunch for all students. The federal government is giving free lunch for all students this year. So therefore, there's not too many high school kids that if you offer them free food, they're going to walk away from it. So there's very little funds this year coming in from people paying for things, but since the quantity of lunches has gone up significantly, and I believe it's about $2.85 or so per lunch that the federal government reimburses us, that combined with some staffing shortages, the fund is going to have a very profitable year. Now, initially they were going to, the federal government this was going to be for 2 years, but the latest news that we've received, it's not included in the current budget that the president has moved forward. So things change. It's early on in that process. Will it come back? We were hoping it was going to be a 2-year, but it looks, at this point, we're sort of planning on it just, okay, that was 1 year, we'll go back to normal. So the budget on this first page is, as you can see, if you look at the revenue, it says revenue from grant, and then the paid meals. The budget's going back, assuming we're going back to where we were prior to COVID, okay? And then basically, the costs for this, if we bring in about $5 million in revenue, about $2.9 million is wages and benefits, and about $2.1 million is food and supplies, and then there's a few other things. And one other thing I want to notice, when you look at the detail on these, the budget for these, we always budget the revenue to equal the expense, okay? That's just the way we budget it. That's the city requests it. That doesn't mean we're going to spend every dime that we bring in or vice versa. A fund can lose money if we don't sell as many lunches, for example, and the expenses are higher. As long as it has a balance at the end, if you look down, you'll see projected ending fund balance. So all these funds have a fund balance. If a fund loses money and the fund balance turns negative, then we have to find money somewhere else, okay? But now that, like I said, with the free lunch and the revenue being significantly higher than we expected this year, this fund should be in good shape. Okay, flipping over to the next one, you don't have that? Okay.
A bunch of 13 things.
Mr. Clapping, hand them out.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Oh, this is all the same. Oh, that's old stuff. Was it? There were extra ones. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so we flip over the next one. It's the food service summer program. So you apply for this with the government, and we supply at a couple of locations each summer free lunches for all students. Adults can come and eat too. We request that they pay, but if they don't, we don't force them to pay. But it's just a summer program that we run basically during the same times that summer school is run. So for the month of August is probably the only month of the year that we don't have sort of food available for the students. And that's a very small program. For the most part, it breaks even each year. Okay, the next one is the driver's education program. Now, we provide at our high schools driver ed program for students of Nashua. Basically, we charge
That's subject to right to know.
Okay, that's fine. Driver's ed, and most of what I'm going to be talking about, by the way, is that sort of first column where it says budget FY 2023. That's what I'll discuss. There are other columns which show previous year's budgets and previous year's actuals, but I'll be just going over the 2023 for the most part. So the revenue from students, we run 5 sessions a year. We charge $550 per student. That is less by about $200 than the 3 local private entities. We have, the last 5 sessions, the number of students per session, we've had a 35, 35, 34, 49, and 44. They can maybe take up to 50 if all the instructors are working that session. So as you can see, the last couple were much higher. What we budgeted for was 5 sessions averaging 36 students. If we do that, we should do fine. Typically, about 70% of the revenue you bring in from the students goes to paying costs for the instructors, because most of the time they're driving the students around in cars. And if anyone wants to do this, let me know. We'll get you a license and you can do it. You do get a break on your side of the car, just to let you know. So currently, the one thing we did budget this year that we don't do all the time is we budgeted for a new vehicle. We have 4 vehicles right now, an 08, an 11, a 13, and a 16. They're all Ford Escapes. We'll probably stick with that because of the cost of vehicles. If we need a vehicle, we budgeted it. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to buy it, but we do have enough funds in the balance to sort of handle it if need be. So it's in the budget. We'll see how it goes. If he wanted to, Mr. Landcourt runs this program. If he wanted to buy 2 vehicles, let's say, we'd probably have to increase the price of the. So what I told him is if he can average about 35 to 40 students all 5 sessions, he should make a little more money, which would then allow him to maybe refresh the fleet a little bit sooner. Okay, next one is the Adult Education Special Revenue Fund. Now, we have an adult education grant, so most of the costs to do the adult education that you see here at evenings, when in the evenings you'll see students coming in and out, are covered by the grant, but not all the costs. The revenue at the top of this, that's $50,000. This, we have a couple different kinds of revenue. We have revenue from students. Yes?
I think you skipped the summer school. It was on the back page of the.
You are correct, I did. So let me go back to summer school. Okay, the summer school one, this is an account that it received its revenue back a few years ago when we had summer schools, like we had a summer Sizzlers program, and it was for students that dealt with science and things, and we would have students, some of the students would pay to go to that program. And I think parents were using it as, okay, I dropped a student off at 8, I pick them up at 12, they do some science things, and then they go home. Other kids would do that. The kids that didn't pay would do that because they'd go to, and then they'd go off to the Boys and Girls Club or something like that. So they did generate some revenue. We were using this for some summer school costs when we couldn't get enough into the operating budget. Right now, with the ESSER funds, we have plenty of funds for summer school. So we'll budget this, but this is just going to sit. This will just sit for this year. There won't be any charges and there won't be any revenue. When the ESSER funds go away, will we even, the programs we have now for summer school, we request the students go. We don't charge anything for summer school. So if we go back to a model where we charge certain students, then this would sort of kick back in. Okay, adult ed. As I said, so there's basically 2 sorts of revenue here. The adult ed special revenue fund deals with, there was some charges for students coming from other towns to take a course or things like that, and there was a small amount that the director would charge to our students because she wanted them to have a little bit of skin in the game. If they paid $50, they'll probably come and take the course. If not, they wouldn't. And the other piece of revenue is what I call community programs. So if there might be a culinary program that people here could take, or woodworking, or small engine repair, things like that. So it's not a huge amount of money. I think it varies on the program between 50 and 150, and adults from the community come and they learn how to fix their lawnmower, let's say. Those took a big hit during COVID, and I'm not 100% sure where we are about getting those back in, but it worked well for the program. So that's sort of where the revenue for this program comes, and then the costs mostly are wages for the staff that run the various courses, benefits associated with some of them, and then various supplies.
Mr. Donovan, before I interrupted you, I think you mentioned a grant that's used to pay for this. Was that?
Well, yes, there's an adult education grant. So most of the costs for the standard adult education program that we have here in Nashua is managed by the grant. If we have some costs that run over, or the grant runs over, then we would put them in here. Okay?
Can I clarify? So, but that grant would be for people who are looking for more the general education, not the
It's
kind of
most-
hobby courses?
Yeah, well, the grant is for students, our students for the most part,
Okay,
that are finishing up at night as opposed to
Right.
day. So that's what the grant is mostly for.
okay.
Okay, Athletic Department Special Revenue Fund. So what this is where the athletic director buys all the uniforms, okay? So basically, you'll notice it'll say athletic fees, $160,000, then you'll see an expense for $160,000. So we collect the funds, the athletic fee funds in this account, but then we transfer it back to the operating budget, because in the operating budget, we have an expected revenue of $160,000. So that's what that is. In this account, it's in and out. The revenue that comes in are the gate receipts at the high school games. So it's basically basketball, hockey, and football. That's where most all the revenue comes from. And I'm not sure they're charging for anything else right now. So that money comes in for gate receipts. Lisa then uses that to buy uniforms, okay? She has a whole schedule, a whole plan. I totally trust Lisa with all that stuff. I didn't ask for it. If you want to see it, I could get it from her. But I did tell her, because if you look at it, we've been spending more on uniforms than we brought in gate receipts. Now, will the gate receipts start to go up, assuming COVID doesn't return? Then hopefully the gate receipts will go up. But she's basically going to sort of track, okay, what did I bring in for gate receipts? That's how many uniforms I can buy, and track that along. If she has a little extra money from another source, then she might supplement that. She does also have a trust fund, which has about $20,000 in it, which she gets that from, sometimes people donate to the athletic teams here. And if a team wants to use our facilities as a fundraiser, then Lisa requests that 20% of what the money raised goes to her trust fund, which is only fair. But if football team's out selling tickets for, buy one, get a pizza free or something, they get to keep all that for the teams. Yes?
Thanks. So if there's a fundraiser for the school, that goes directly to the individual team, or does that go into the, back into the revenue budget?
If the fundraiser has nothing to do with facility usage here, then it goes directly to the team.
Okay. Would it be possible for, because I also know that Lisa's a meticulous record keeper, would it be possible for us to get a breakdown into what the fundraising, how that comes down, and how much that brings in individually, and then how it gets redistributed, or what it pays for, whether it's paying for partial parts of the uniforms, equipment, I don't know, fees for referees or whatever. And I'm thinking, since we didn't really, probably if it was just last year's, it probably wouldn't be very effective because we didn't have a traditional sports season. So maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, would that be more accurate?
Well, yeah, I mean, we could go back and give you information on what was raised that came to the district over the last few years, dollar amounts. That we have, that shouldn't be hard to pull.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to revisit something that came up when Ms. Gingras was here. And Ms. Brown, you brought up the situation, the quality of the state of the Elm Street uniforms. And I left there thinking, these kids, they're going to be in a, I hate to say it, so I'll just say old school, while their middle school counterparts are in brand new state-of-the-art facilities. you would think that the kids that should have the best uniforms are the kids that are waiting for the new school to open. And then I understand that they have to choose a name and the colors, and I just thought, why couldn't we just have them called the Eagles and stick with red and white, or make that move now so those kids can get new uniforms? And I've been told that it's up to this board to choose the name for the school. If we're not ready to do that, just keep the Eagles, keep the colors, and let the Elm Street kids have nice new uniforms.
Interesting enough, that question came up when we were, because I meet with all the people that are in charge of these special revenue funds, and Lisa had a number of different concerns. So, well, we could certainly have her come and discuss that at some point, but she did have some concerns that I never even thought of. So if you want to move forward on that, we could have Lisa come. I don't know if you want to do it at Finance and Ops or at a full board meeting.
Let's talk about where it would be best to be brought into, if it's Finance and Ops, or if it's, I don't think it's anything that we need to vote on. But even if it's just information, I mean, if Mr. Claffey wants to email Garth, and then Garth kind of sends him off to Lisa to have that conversation, then, I mean, I'm not necessarily, I think this is interesting information, but like, I know I'm okay not knowing the answer. So if anybody else on the board wants to know, I don't know. Ms. Brown?
I think it'd be worth a committee discussion, honestly, because there might end up being a vote if it's something that we need to make an early purchase that's not in the regular athletic budget. And yeah, I think it's worth sending to committee.
All right, well, you guys figure it out, but like I said, obviously we need Lisa before we sort of make
Right.
any decisions. Okay, the next one is the facility rental. Pretty straightforward. We rent out our facilities mostly. The most use are the gyms and the auditoriums, mostly at the high schools and at Elm Street Middle School. Few other.
Bless you.
So there's a policy which gives all the rates that we charge for things. This number, this is also something that we budget in the operating budget as a negative, as a revenue. So that's why it's 100,000. That's what we budgeted now. We were budgeting about 140,000 and bringing in a little more than that prior to COVID. It sort of ramped up. We had some sort of good customers, so to speak, but that all sort of slipped. So now we're a little more conservative with our estimate, and we'll sort of see how it goes. But basically, when we budget it, we know that the cost, the increased cost, custodians will be working, there's overtime, so we charge the overtime here, and then the rest of it is sort of profit that we bring back to the operating budget each year. So this is one of the ones that does zero out every single year. Okay, and then next is the after-school program, 21st Century. So when we look at the grants in a minute, you'll see we have 2 grants now, 21st Century. Those grants, right now, those grants have enough funding to run pretty much the full program. We've had the state over the years, sometimes we've had 2 grants from the state for 21st Century, sometimes we've had 1. Sometimes they reduce the amounts. For a while, this account was used to pick up the excess cost. The funding from the grant did not cover the full cost of running these after-school programs, especially for it would cover the cost of all the coordinators and the people that run it, the people that work full-time on it, but the people that would come in and work part-time here and there, it didn't have enough money for that. So this special revenue covered that. Now, it does get some revenue. It's got, you see, revenue from federal grant. That's basically snacks. So the federal government pays for snacks for the students in the after-school program, which, I mean, when I was young, I'd come home from school, I'd have a snack, right? So they deserve it too. Though mine were all healthy, fully healthy, that's all I ever ate. And then the tuition, now the interesting thing is, it's a grant-funded program, but the government says you have to charge tuition to each child. Now, you don't have to force them to pay it, and if they don't pay it, you don't prevent them from attending the program, but you do request. So we request relatively small amounts of money. A lot of people will pay those small amounts of money, so that money goes in here as tuition. The number that we have budgeted is $85,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but if we have all the students in and they're all paying, you know, a couple of bucks a day or something like that, it adds up and we get the money. Now, the interesting thing is then the state says, but every dollar you collect, you're supposed to spend. But since we don't know what we're going to collect, it's hard to spend it. So basically, I told Gail Casey, who runs the program, I said, let's just do it what makes logical. We'll collect it one year, and we'll budget to spend it the next year. We don't know what's coming in. It's hard to spend amounts that you don't know what's coming in. So that's kind of what we're doing. That's something that's relatively new. We didn't have to spend it all. We could save it in this account, and that's why it's always had a balance. But that's where we are with it now.
I have a question. So I've recently learned that 21st Century is not at all the schools. So the school my grandson is going to be going to is from the Adult Learning Center, is their after-school program. Do we have information on that, or how is that funded?
Yeah, that's separate. That's a relationship between the parent and the 21st Century program. So, Adult Learning Center, sorry.
Yeah.
Adult Learning Center pays us a very small amount for rent, and that's the only relationship we have, and then...
So the parents pay directly to the Adult Learning
Yes,
Center? Okay,
yes.
thank you. Is that only one or two schools, or?
Most of them. I think all of them, actually.
The Adult Learning Center?
Some of them had both. And Garth will look it up, but for a while they had it both, and I don't know why somebody would choose one over the other, but some had both, some just had one. So Dr. McKinney will get an answer for that.
Yeah, our elementary school was one that had both of them in there. And both kids in both sides. It's neat.
The three schools I long-term subbed at all had 21st Century, because it met in the library, so I was very involved with what was happening after school. So I just was curious when I heard that the Adult Learning Center was providing it.
Okay, well, he's looking that up. We'll move on. The next two, they're the North Student Shop and the South Student Shop. Now, basically, there are funds in these two. When I first started here, there were shops at the high schools. Students could buy T-shirts, supplies, food, things like that. It's changed over the last few years. Right now, any sort of, Nashua South football goes through the football program. They're taking any revenues, and they're dealing with all the food because of the federal government's regulations on food, where there's limited to the things we could sell. So they sort of shut down food for a while. There's still food now, which I'll get to in a minute. And then, students didn't buy any supplies and things. So and then what happened was the DECA program, which is run through, that's a student activity fund. They're the ones that run the stores now, and they'll sell certain cookies and drinks and things like that. They're supposed to meet the guidelines. And it's at least twice a year I get a call from the food service director. They're selling those cookies again. So I just want to try one sometime, but they seem to sell very well. But they do not, meet the guidelines. So basically, we budget this each year, but I think at some point, maybe CTE should look at this and say, okay, there's a small amount of money in here. If you're not going to run the stores, if you want to keep the model that you're doing now, then maybe we can put some legislation in and move this money to some other fund so they'll actually use it, because for the last probably 5 years, it's just been sitting here. And like I said, it's not a lot. The north has 3,952 and the south has 1,743. So, it's $5,500, but if just going to sit there year after year, there should be something done with it.
Do the business students still run, weren't there business, when I was in high school, the business classes ran the high school shops?
Yes,
Do they
that's
still
the
do that?
DECA program.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, next is Culinary Arts. Now, this over the years has had very high revenues at times, and now it's much more modest because the program is being run, so the goal is to teach the students how to cook, not to teach the students how to run a catering event. So basically, most of the beginning of the year, they're teaching the students how to cook. Around this time of year, they'll start maybe at the North Star Cafe here, have some food available so that teachers can purchase it, and they may run a catering event or two. So they will make a little bit of money. That's where the revenue will come from, and then most of the, and any costs associated with that will incur here. So if they run, they'll make some money each year, usually. What we did this year was each student needs to buy aprons and things for the kitchen. The free and reduced students, we use these funds to buy the aprons for the free and reduced students. So the good thing about making some money in this, we can make those decisions and purchase those things.
Didn't we have some donations this year to fund the aprons? Didn't I see that come through?
Yeah, there was discussion about how it was going to be funded.
Yeah.
I think we ended up, the 2,785 cost this year was charged here. There was discussion, I think it was with United Way. I'm not sure if it actually came through or not, because I think we said, no, we've got the funds.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they are here. It was just, I think the people involved in the discussion weren't. We actually had a meeting with the culinary department and the business secretary here and sort of explained everything, because they basically have 3 different funding sources. So we spent some time a couple weeks ago, and we wrote it all down. That probably won't happen again. Okay, the daycare. This is the Purple Panther program at South. Basically, they run a Monday, Wednesday program and a Tuesday, Thursday program. They're for 4-year-olds. Maybe I think you can be 3 also. It's basically $230 a month. That's cheaper than most other programs of their kind. We also, so the revenue is we assume that we would have the full class and all the students would be paying. We do, though, because we can put up to 15 students in each session. Sometimes we put some of our special ed students in this program. They do not pay, so the revenue would drop. If this program got to the point where it was losing money, special ed would supplement the cost because they're putting the students in. So far, we've been able to keep a balance in this account, but if it got low, and it has been getting lower, because really the only cost here is it's the cost of the coordinator who runs the program and her benefits. So, and then there's a few supplies, but it's not too much. So that's what this is. It's been running well. The coordinator's been doing it a bunch of years now, and everything I hear, she's done a very good job. And you gave her a big raise this year, so that was good. Okay, the next one is the special education local tuition. So what this is where the revenue comes from when we have students from outside the district come into our program. So Brentwood, for example, or We have some programs for the hard of hearing and things like that, and that was one of the questions that's answered in the information I gave to you tonight. So this is where the revenue for those students goes. And basically what we've used it for over the years was many years when the out-of-district tuition was way over what we had in the operating budget, I would charge extra costs here. The last few years, I haven't had to do that. I've had extra money in the operating budget to cover the excess in the out-of-district tuition. So this account, as you can see, has started to grow. But if we get another uptick in out-of-district tuition costs, this fund is sort of a reserve to cover that. So basically, what we cover in, if we get a lot of students that come in that require a para, we have some money in here to cover that. We have money to cover out-of-district tuition. And then also, if you bring students move in during the year and the OT-PT costs increase, then this would cover that if the operating budget couldn't. So this was, back when I started, this had a fairly high balance, and then we started really hitting it with the extra OT-PT and out-of-district costs. Then the last few years, we've been keeping all those costs in the operating budget, so it started to grow again. So that's what that is. And then the last one, the Cte Tuition Fund, this is a fund where the revenue comes from the students that come to our CTE programs. So that's done via districts. So if Milford were to send us 12 students, the state has a calculation and they'll say, you need to pay Nashua so much. So those monies go into this account, and we will be using these funds to pay for equipment needs in the CTE programs. So as of right now, we have $500,000 in here, which is good. CTE is putting together a plan now, and you'll probably hear something next week at Finance and Ops about they're going to hire an architect for sort of fixing one of the programs. I don't know off the top of my head which one it is. But this is our source for funding. We do have a Perkins Grant, but Perkins Grant is very specific about what you can spend it on. You can spend it on new equipment, but you can't use it on replacement equipment. Even if you were to redo a whole program, like a few years back, we redid the, my lack of hair, the cosmetology program, and Perkins would cover certain things like sinks because they were a new form of sink, but they wouldn't cover other costs because they were, like chairs, for example, because they were replacements. So it's good to have this. We've been building this up. We had another account which has about $17,000 left in it. We've been spending that down because it no longer has revenue. CTE will probably spend the rest of that this year. You'll see that, I think, at the May Finance and Ops. They'll spend that down, and then they'll start charging this. Now, anything that gets charged here, the board has to approve any costs that come out of here, so we're not just going to start charging. Any costs that, excuse me, that get charged here, we'll bring through the Finance and Ops and Board of Ed. Okay, so those are the special revenue funds. Like I said, after you're done with the operating budget, you might want to do a motion to approve the special revenue funds also. In the budget book that the city puts out every year, a section of it is special revenue funds. So it's probably worthwhile doing. I don't think we've approved them the last couple of years because a lot of them really weren't running. So basically, it would be, I just sort of did a budget on my own. But now that they're back in action and stuff, I think, we've met with everyone and we should probably do that.
Could we get a count on how many people we're contracting for OT, PT, therapies, and that kind of thing at this point?
What's
Like
that again?
just a general number of how many individuals we're employing through like OT, PT, therapy, that kind of, speech therapy, I don't know, whatever kind of,
So how many OTs we
are
contract with? and
contracted as
PTs?
opposed to district employees?
Okay, most all of the OT and PTs, we have a contract with 2 different companies, and I don't think we have any OTs and PTs in our budget, so they're all contracted.
That's what I was thinking, thank you.
Yeah. The thing that the contracting company, a lot of OTs and PTs, and I don't fully understand, but a lot of them like sort of working 2 or 3 days a week. So when they work for these firms, the firms just sort of mesh it and say, okay, you're going to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'll work Tuesday and Thursday, and there's sort of one position. And so they do all that behind the, they gather all those people, and they're able to provide the services. So, any other questions on that? Okay, so we'll take a look at 13A, which is the grants summary. Now, this is another funding source. So if you look at the first page, you'll see listed here are what I would call the significant grants. We have other grants, maybe at 50,000 or, 20,000, some smaller ones. I didn't list them all here. This list shows numbers that are significantly higher than a typical year. But of this 56 million that's listed here, the CARES and ESSER money is 45 million of that. So these other significant grants are about $11 to $12 million. So in a typical year, when we don't have the ESSER funding, we would have between 12 and $13 million of grants, okay? The grants do not coincide with the operating budget or our fiscal year. Most of these grants are managed by the state, come from the federal government, and the funding for some of them start in July, like the 21st Century ones. Some of them, the funding starts in October. Some of them last 2 years. You get one every year, but they have a 2-year cycle. So it's somewhat complicated. This information is not typically in the budget book. That may be changing because of the calculation of the spending cap, and I'm not going to get into all that right now. But I think we'll just run through them quickly to sort of let you know that this is another funding source. So I think in my budget presentation, I talked about we have 160 million, that's the operating budget. But then we have this amount of funds. We also have special revenue funds. So there's other funding that run our schools. So the cost of our schools is not just the operating budget. Okay, and if you want, there is a detail of each one of these grants in a PDF file. It's 2 megabytes. I certainly wasn't going to print it out because it was going to be about that thick. But if you want it, let me know and we can send it to you. And it basically is the grant management system break, so what we put in grant management system. So if you wanted to know more detail on a specific grant, what do we spend it on, you can see the actual detail. We did put it together, and I saw how big it was. I said, I'm not printing that out. Got to save on copying. Okay, so the first grant listed here is the IDEA grant. You're probably all familiar with that. That's for special education funding. I'm sure Mrs. Johnson many times had said how much of the actual cost of the federal government. So the federal government sets lots of rules. You've got to spend, you've got to meet all these, and then they come through and they provide about 25% of the costs, and the rest we have to get. But this is the grant this year. The allocation is $3.3 million. There are some teachers that are charged to this grant every single year. And then there's a few other positions. And then there's excess OT, PT costs, which I mentioned before. Some of those can go here. So you have to put some money towards private schools. and you can purchase some equipment and things. But every one of these grants, before you can spend a dime, you have to write a description of what you want to spend in that grant, and you send it up to the state reviews it, and then they'll tell you whether you can spend the money or not. And then once we've spent the money and incurred the cost, we send basically an invoice up to the state, and they pay us back. So that's the IDEA grant. The next one is the Perkins Grant. That's for CTE things. Most of it is spent on equipment, and some of it's spent on consultants and things like that to help plan and design spaces and things like that. That's about, this year it's 381. It ranges between 300,000 and 400,000 each year. Next one is Title I. Title I is typically our largest grant, and that's for, it's basically 5 title schools, which are Ledge, Fairgrounds, Dr. Chris, Mount Pleasant, and Amherst. Yes. What's that? I got 4 out of 5 just like that. Come on. It's pretty good. So in here are each school, the director of this program works with each of the principals. So some of the schools may say, I'd like to have a couple more reading teachers. Someone may want another para, someone. So each school has slightly different staffing, but they're given so much money based on the free and reduced numbers, and there's a whole formula. So it gets a little bit tricky to budget it, but for the most part, it does get done. Some of this money does go to private schools, relatively small amount, but they do get some. And we've used this also for some of the summer programming, the Power Scholars and things like that. So.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
I know that we were kind of struggling with getting the free and reduced applications done. Are we looking at any shifts in what the budget looks like because of those applications not getting completed?
No, the federal government used older numbers for funding.
Okay.
So at this point, we're okay. It'll be interesting. I'm wondering if one of the reasons why they didn't want to give free lunch for all again next year was because those numbers tie into a lot of these grant funding formulas. I don't know, but that's possible.
Okay.
I have a question too, Mr. Donovan. It says homeless transportation is part of this Title I grant. Is that what's used to pay for the buses for the presentation that we saw earlier?
Yes, some of the cost of the homeless goes here. That's required in the grant. That's a fairly recent thing. Over the last 3 or 4 years, they've said you've got to put a certain dollar amount into transportation. You've got to put and there's the whole McKinney-Vento piece. There has to be a certain amount of this grant spent on that. Okay, the next one is the Title II grant. This year, it's $726,000 allocated by the state, and most of this pays for our coaches. Ms. Sarfty can explain more in detail about all that, but this was, back when I first started, there were a number of teachers here, because I think back when Clinton was in office, increased it, and people were adding teachers to reduce class size, and so over the years this grant has changed a lot about what it's used for. Right now, like I said, we use it for PD and we use it for coaches, and that pretty much covers what we do with that. Okay, the next one is the Title III, which is the ELL. It's only a couple $100,000. It's an area we could probably use a much larger grant, but at this point it is what it is. It's always been about that. So Mr. Chopa deals with this, and you can see some of the WIDA, which is the testing. He gets to charge some of that there. He charges some of the software used by the ELL staff and interpreters and things like that to help to help run the program.
Can I ask a question? Do you know, is this just straight based on the number of ELL students we have in the program? Is that where the amount comes from?
Some of it, not all of it, but some of it, yes. I think it was, it's such a small, I think it's in the answer to the questions, that it was $180 per ELL student, so it's really not a lot of money.
But you're right, it should be more.
Yes, should be. Okay, next one is Title 4A. Now this grant, it's $380,000 this year. This is new, a couple of years, Garth? Yeah, 2 or 3 years, we didn't have any Title 4A. I believe this grant in Title II, Ms. Sarfty's the one that deals with this, but this grant is mostly for PD and things. I think the first year we got it, it was kind of a surprise to us, so we didn't even really spend all the money. But now that so it's still new, we're still learning, but for the most part, we're charging some of our assistant principals part-time, and the rest of it is for PD. So that's pretty much how it's being used right now. I think over time, in this budget, we pulled 2 of the assistant principals out. They're in the operating budget now, which will free up money for PD in the long term here. I think that's what the plan is. Then there's the 21st Century grants. There's actually 2 of them that equal $859,000. It covers, there's the Title I schools, and then they also have, I think, Birch and Sunset were added. So basically, this is the cost to run the program. Most of the money goes to staffing and benefits for the people that each school has a coordinator. And there's a secretary that helps with the program, and then there's all the costs of running the program. So, and as we talked before about the special revenue fund, if these grants can't manage it, the costs would slide there. Right now, with this level of funding, it can cover most of the costs. And this has also been a program where COVID has caused a significant reduction in employees wanting to work there, so therefore they're not able to take as many kids because they're limited by the staff. So hopefully that will clear up next year. And okay. And
Mr. Donovan, I'm sorry, I have a question.
Fine.
There's no total on this fund like the other ones. Didn't know why.
You're right, the page doesn't have it, but it's 859. It's on the summary page on the front. Okay.
Thank you.
See, I like how you're catching all this little stuff. This is good. That's how I look at things. Okay. Then there's the CARES ESSER funds, okay? So the CARES 1, which came out first, $3.2 million. As of March 10th of 2019, we could spend through September of this year, of 2022. So we have spent just about all this money at this point. And there's a list of what we spent it on. Most of it was on Chromebooks, which was early in the COVID time period. And then that, it says we're HVAC improvements, that $586,000. We've actually moved that. We're going to move that to one of the ESSER 2 because we can't get that work done. And we've given, most of those funds will be spent by the special education department. And we've sort of fixed this grant in the last week or so. So this one should be all set. And one other thing I'll notice, I have mentioned that probably in May at Finance and Ops, I'll give an update on plans for spending on all the ESSER. Okay, so the ESSER 2, which is about $13 million, we've allocated, as you can see from the sheet, about $8.5 million of that. But for example, if you look at the sheet, you'll see ELL teachers, 2.2 million. So there's 15 ELL teachers. We put that in the beginning of the year. I think we've hired 2. So it's been hard to find them. So we're going to keep it in for this next school year and hopefully get more ELL teachers. But if we can't, then we'll have to sort of reallocate this money, because this grant ends September of 2023. So it's rare that you get this size of a grant, and CARES 2 and CARES 3, or ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, have a lot more flexibility than all these other grants. These other grants you can supplement, you can't supplant. So you can't take things out of your operating budget and charge it. CARES 3, you can do that with certain things. But these dollar amounts are so large, there's just a lot more flexibility built in. So this one, where we update this, the grant manager, myself, Dr. McKinney, and assistant superintendent sit down every couple months and go through the grants and say, okay, are we going to spend this? What else do people want? So it's a process, but it'll be interesting for these next 2 grants because of the size of them. And then the third one.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry. The family engagement and outreach under the ESSER 2 funds,
Yes.
what is, that's a big dollar amount, but what are we doing?
We had staff working about 12 to 15 hours a week that would work as outreach to parents, mostly the Hispanic community. And we decided that since we had extra funds, we would pay for them to work closer to 35 hours a week.
Oh, cool.
So that's what we're doing.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then ESSER 3, the big guy, $29 million. I can't even say it without choking. So this we have until 2024. We haven't really budgeted too much yet here. We're working on that now. We will be charging some of the construction work at Franklin Street will be going here. That's about $6 million. So I plan on trying to spend this kind of money on grant-related activities in a year or 2 is almost impossible. So you have to spend some of it on sort of big-ticket items, construction things. So this is the grant that you'll see. We may do some of the HVAC work at Birch Hill and Maine Dunstable, which is long overdue. So if we can do those 2, we'll do the Franklin piece, and we'll do the rear wings at the 3 schools. So that should go a long way. That will save a lot of bonding, and but there still will be some other funds in here. And basically, we have, a little over 2 years to decide what to do with them. But once we get the construction numbers calculated in, then we'll see how they go. And some of the things we're putting in, let's say, in CARES or ESSER 2, we're using some contracted services for some mental health services. So if they work well, do we want to continue that for another year? So we started that this year. We're going to roll it into next year. We're working on a contract with that now, and then do we want to do it another year? So those kind of things. But a lot of times you have to try these programs. You have to see if they work. Sometimes they don't work. And the rest of the world that works with school districts all know that this money's out there. So it's not a day goes by that I don't get emails and phone calls about all the wonderful ways they have of spending this money for us. So my no button just sits there. Okay, that's the grants. And I think other than that, I think we're all set. Next week, now the one thing that has not been brought forward yet, and I have a bunch of the information on my desk, but I'll bring forward, next week we have the public hearing, and then I'll also have available information on enrollment, okay? So I've got a bunch of that, but I wanted to get comfortable and put it together in a little better format than what I have right now on my desk. So I will have that next week. And then we'll have the public hearing, and then, then it's, if you have any other questions, let me know, but then it's up to this board to make changes, vote on approving, et cetera, it'll sort of be given back to the board.
Ms. Gilio?
I just have a follow-up on, do we know how many schools the Adult Learning Center services?
They're in all 11 schools, either the before school or the after-school program, or both. All schools except Letch.
Thank you.
Yep.
Glad you could pull that together, Dr. McKinney.
Well, pinch hitter over there. Do we have any other questions? All right. So I would be, hold on. Okay, so I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have nobody on the phone, so all those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Okay, any opposed? None opposed, so we are now adjourned at 7:39. Have a great night, everybody.
Where we put the